let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big piece of
what is that
process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Hello and welcome to today's Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hours live stream. I am Andrew Sullivan, and today I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Jonny Rickard. How are you, sir? Uh-oh, did we lose you? Oh no, oh, your audio. I was just thinking, we kicked off the stream and there's the whole opening video, and mine started to stutter a little bit. So obviously I'm not in my home office today. I'm at Red Hat Tower in downtown Raleigh, and I'm connected to the VPN. Lester, is it audio issues for all of us? Let's see. So for the stream overall.
Hey, can you hear me? Sorry about that. My headphones disconnected. I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah, no worries. So yeah. Jonny, I guess we're gonna have to get you a Christmas present. Get you an actual microphone.
Well, it's because I've got my headphones hooked up to my Mac and my Linux machine, so I think something triggers it, and it's like, oh, I've got to go over there. Yeah. So, how are you, Andrew?
I'm good. I was getting ready to say I'm in the tower today, so I'm in one of the little in the offices. So I'm on Wi-Fi. I'm connected to a VPN back to my house because that's where all of my, I have a cluster provision in case we need to show anything or all that other stuff. And, I'm on it's not an unfamiliar, but I'm on a different, laptop than normal. So I'm hoping that my setup here holds on. I don't have anything.
It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine.
It's we're not sprinting across the finish line, right? We're like we've stumbled. We're now like rolling down the road across the finish line.
It's like that video of the sprinter on the track where he gets hurt and his dad comes out and he's like helping him get across. That's where we are right now, right? Like we're holding on to somebody.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny you say that because as is no secret from the title of today's episode, you and I were talking earlier this week, and we're like, what are we going to talk about? We tried to get, how many people did you reach out to? Like 5 or 6 different people to try and get a guest lined up and a topic. And, it's the end of the year. So we're like, what are we going to talk about? And I'm in the tower because I'm in a 2-day workshop. Like, it's just lots of stuff going on. So we're like, let's talk about what's happened, because it's been one heck of a year. Like, I'm not talking like, 2022 global disaster, 2021, its own fiasco. I'm talking like from an OpenShift perspective, it's been busy. There's a ton of stuff that's been going on in OpenShift, in Kubernetes, in Red Hat, kind of across the industry as a whole. So, we were talking about this, and I think we both thought it was an interesting premise to try, which is a little, not that we're super formal here on the stream, but even less formal than we normally are. Let's have a conversation. Let's chat with anybody and everybody who's watching and talk about what's been going on with 2022, with OpenShift, et cetera, and then potentially some things for 2023, which is kicking off with a bang. The first couple of weeks, fingers crossed, of 2023.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be all. I mean, if 2022 is any indication of what 23 is going to be like, then we're in for a hell of a year. Yeah,
it's that's something to talk. We should talk about that. Let's put a pin in that, right?
Yeah.
What was that movie? Bolt. I don't know if your kids ever watched that movie, Bolt.
Yes.
When the little girl wants to bring her dog home, and let's just put a pin in that. Yeah.
We'll see that.
So, hello to our audience. Thank you for joining us today. As I just said, Jonny and I, it's going to be a little more informal. We're happy to talk about anything and everything you want. We've got a few things that each one of us kind of contributed to our list here of just stuff to talk about, stuff to have a conversation around. So anything that's on y'all's mind, anything that you want to talk about, you want to contribute to the conversation, that's what we're here for. And that includes anything technical. As I said, I do have an OpenShift cluster available. We can poke around inside of it if we need to. We can take a look at things and all of that. So, and that's kind of in addition to, the normal, it's an office hours live stream. So anything that you all want to ask about, how does this work? What does this look like? Why is this broken type of stuff? We'll do our best to answer those questions and figure out what it's going to be like. So. Compostable. I hope you mean composable OpenShift, Dwayne.
Yeah, he corrected.
Yeah. So let's talk about that here in just a minute. Jonny, I think we had one top of mind topic. We'll get there in just a minute, Dwayne.
Yep. Yeah, it was just that on December 9th, Kubernetes 1.26 officially released. I think there were 37 features and 12 deprecations. I'm going to put the release notes in here. They do this theme every time that they have a new release, and this time the theme is electrifying. And I've got to say, it's probably my favorite logo so far. This one is pretty rad. So
I haven't seen it.
I'm gonna paste the link here. It's pretty red. It looks like an old retro, like a Malibu sign kind of thing. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so the deprecations. There's a bunch of storage ones that were in there, like GlusterFS CSI. There were some other CSIs that were going, but I think that they've been talking about it for a while, and now they're actually deprecated. There were 2 APIs that were being deprecated. It was
deprecated or removed?
Removed.
Okay.
So, or no, actually, I'm lying. Deprecated. And so then it was like V1 Beta 2 or something like that for one of the API ones. Let me stop guessing and just go and look. But it didn't look like
blog post if you can.
Yeah, well, let's do that. All right, so share this.
I was just looking at the logo. It's very 1980s, very Miami Vice.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the theme. The theme is electrifying the logo. It's probably my favorite. It is seriously, it's awesome. I hope they make some stickers of this because this would be an awesome one to have. But yeah, so some of the things that they're getting rid of are the CRI V1 Alpha 2 API and then the V1 Beta 1. So you're right, they were removals, not just deprecations. And then I think the only one that might apply to OpenShift is going to be this V2 Beta 2 for the HPA, but I would have to look into that. But the rest of these, I don't know if there's going to be that much of an effect on OpenShift. So I would just have to go back and look. But those are the big ones that I noticed right away. Everything else is kind of the stuff that we've seen before, especially with the GlusterFS CSI and some of this OpenStack CSI stuff. But one of the cool things. Oh, go ahead.
I'm thinking out loud here of, so OpenShift 4.11 is Kubernetes 1.24 based, which means that, and especially with 1.26 just being released now, so OpenShift 4.12 will be 1.25 released.
Yep.
So it'll be 4.13 at a minimum. And remember, releases happen approximately every 4 months. So, we're looking towards the early spring timeframe, I think, early to mid-spring timeframe of 2020. Well, I say that for the northern hemisphere,
right,
of 2023 before any of this would affect OpenShift.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing here too is that they added it looks like they've added a pretty decent amount of Windows support. So if you go and look on the left-hand side, there's some blogs where they're talking about where they updated the Windows host process, so you can actually go in and use privileged containers with your Windows nodes if you needed to. The other thing is that this release is the first release that is exclusively using the new registry. So instead of it using registry.gcr.io, it's now using registry.kates.io. So if you're trying to use 1.26 and you've got some old automation, you're gonna have to update it so that way it uses the new registry pointer. And then other than that, that's pretty much it.
And you can remove firewall exceptions and allow list and all that other stuff for those other registries if you're one of those organizations that's real strict about that.
Yep.
let's see. Let's talk about some questions that have come up so far. So Dwayne, I think composable OpenShift is still either dev preview or tech preview, which means that docs won't show up until basically docs don't show up in the official docs.openshift.com until it goes GA. So you'll most likely have to look, and let me see if I can find my right window here. Most likely have to look on GitHub if I had to guess. And I'm not on my normal computer today, so I'm not logged into GitHub, of course.
All right.
But you should be able to look. So you should be able to look. Let me share my screen here. Button, share screen. So you should be seeing my desktop here, or my browser window here, right?
Yep.
Okay. I've only got one screen today, so I can't see what I'm sharing. So if we do OpenShift install explain install config dots, I don't remember now. Because who was it that we had on to talk about composable OpenShift?
Ben Parties, I think.
So if we look at this OpenShift install dots, I just lost it, capabilities. So this is where in the install config, you would configure which things are included or not, as the case may be. So if we look at, I don't think both of those are strings, so it won't go any further down than that. But yeah, essentially search GitHub for this additional enabled capabilities. Oh, come on. I'm using Linux today instead of my normal Mac, so I keep hitting key combos that are for the wrong operating system.
All right.
There we go. We'll get there eventually, I promise.
Yep. And I found the upstream or our docs link to it, and I'm gonna paste the episode link soon.
And this makes me wonder if it's been added to the docs yet.
The docs aren't like super deep. They're pretty scarce. But if you go under like post installation,
yeah, but
cluster capabilities.
Interesting, but that's enabling, not.
Yeah.
I was hoping that there'd be because you have to, in order to enable them day 2, you have to not include them day 1 during install, right? So I'm surprised that they don't have anything in here about how to do that. Anyways, so yeah, it's in here. Let me find. Okay, you already posted that in there. Yeah, I would recommend, at least for the install process, you can absolutely use. Come on now, I'm getting confused on my windows. You can use this, OpenShift install explain, and that's how you can figure out which values, which settings to put in the install config to remove those values. And then I suspect that, or I hope that this has, yeah. So here's the set of things that are available or not available. So like known capabilities. So you can choose to omit these things from that. So when we put in the, what was it? Basically you set the baseline capability set to, I think it's 411 or none, I don't remember. And then you set the additional capabilities based off of that. But yeah, we've got a whole live stream on that. Thank you for digging up the link for that, Johnny.
Yeah, no problem. I also put the GitHub issue that Ben had shared with us as well.
Okay. So yeah, composable OpenShift. So for anybody who doesn't know, so composable OpenShift is a fledgling, so again, not GA, or maybe it's just now GA in a very limited capacity, capability to not include certain aspects of the core OpenShift deployment. So what do I mean by that? So core OpenShift is effectively all of the things that are managed as cluster operators. So as you saw on the documentation page over here, so things like Marketplace or OpenShift samples. When you look over here, you've got this Marketplace, we've got OpenShift samples, right? So effectively what it's saying is don't deploy those operators at installation time. And you'll note that these are not, they're not OLM managed operators, right? So if I do an OC get subscription, here's my cluster here has no additional operators installed. So all of these are managed directly by cluster version operator, which is that core, if I could do an OC get CVO, no, cluster version maybe.
Cluster version.
Yeah, so this is that core cluster version, what controls which, well, version, like, but which set of operators, which set of resources are deployed and make up the cluster as a whole. I'm realizing now that I forgot to bring a cup of water with me as I sit here and have a coffee, or try to not have a coughing fit into the microphone.
Just let it ride, man. Just let it happen.
So, so this is for a couple of different reasons. One, when we start to look at things like single node OpenShift, it helps to reduce the footprint even further. Today, there's not a lot of things that are configurable in that way. So that means that it may not provide a huge benefit, but it is some benefits. But two, it also gives us the ability to reduce the footprint, right? So this is one of those things of like, you don't want to have a bunch of extra crap installed because, well, that increases attack surfaces. It's more things that you have to update. It's, all of the other reasons why extra unnecessary things are just extra and unnecessary. So I'm looking forward to seeing more and more of those capabilities added in as optional, composable type of things. So that way we can very precisely configure and manage those. What's interesting here is this cluster, like you can see bare metal. This cluster is deployed to Azure. I don't need the bare metal management tools deployed inside of this cluster. So it's just taking up resources inside of there. Usually there's several others that are inside of here, depending on point to, it'll install additional resources. Anyways.
Yeah, the other thing I like about that too is like, but we also talked about it in that stream, was that, being able to remove the console, especially when you have customers that don't want any interaction in the console, right? Like they literally just want people to use, DevOps or, pipeline workflow, that type of thing, to make any changes to their clusters. Like that's gonna be huge.
Yeah, that's one of the next ones they're supposed to add, right? Is the ability to remove the console. So yeah, I think that'll be an interesting one, right? It's like, being able to deploy RHEL. Do you want a desktop or do you not want a desktop?
Exactly.
Let's see, a question from Mo. Trying to install OpenShift on vSphere using IPI regarding worker ODF and infranodes. What is the difference between machine sets and defining an array in the compute section in the install config? So I don't think an array will work there. Do you know off the top of your head, Johnny?
I'm pretty sure you can only define the worker and control planes.
Yeah, so let's do the same thing. So in my thing here, I've got OpenShift install explain install config dot compute. And then I want dot platform. Yeah, all of these are objects. They're not object arrays. So if I were to do dot vSphere. Yeah, so once I get down to vSphere, you can see it's an integer of how many cores per socket for the default set or the first machine set that it creates out of the box to have. Same thing for the number of CPUs, the amount of memory, the size of the operating system disk. So we can't, just using the install config, we can't create multiple machine sets in that way. That being said, it is technically possible to do. So if I were to, gosh, I haven't deployed a cluster in vSphere in so long. I don't think I have any examples anymore. Sure, we'll try one of these. So all I'm doing is I'm just copying in an install config and hoping that it's a full one so that I can use examples. So let's do OpenShift install create manifests.
Yep.
And then inside here, we can go into OpenShift, and you see it creates these machines for the control plane nodes, and then it creates a machine set for the first worker nodes. So technically, you can go in and you can create an additional machine set. So if I do a simple vim on this guy. Come on. No, you're not going to work for me, are you? So if I just do a set on this, right, it's a vSphere machine set, right? You can copy this, you can modify it, you can create additional of these as you'd like, including setting the number of replicas. Good is, yes, you can do this. I would say why? Because if you let the cluster deploy and then create the machine set, you're going to have the exact same experience. Because you can create, say, an infrastructure machine set, but you can't configure the infrastructure services to land on that machine set until day 2 anyways, until after the cluster is deployed. So you're not making things any faster, but you're adding extra dependencies to the success of the deployment, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, your other option too is to use something like, if you're using GitOps, or if you're using, GitOps is probably like the best Red Hat answer. It's have your machine sets out in your Git repo, and then apply that repo as an application, and let the machine sets get rolled out that way too. Because to your point, Andrew, like you're just adding fluff to it, right? And sometimes it'll cause an error in your deployment, and then you'll have to go back and debug, and hopefully you haven't fat fingered something,
Yeah, and Christian and I did a stream on that a while ago, like 2 years ago, where Christian did exactly that. He created a machine set at install time, using the manifests, and then deployed a cluster doing that. And we basically had the exact same conversation of, yes, it's possible, but does it make sense? Is it necessarily something that you want to do? It's very strange sitting in an office and watching people walk by. I'm not used to that. So I'm sitting here. There's like a small crowd of people that's chit-chatting right outside. It's a big glass wall. Very strange, very different. I haven't been in an office in 3 years. Let's see, Taylor. If you define machines and install config, it will be targetable by the autoscaler. Or can you only target a proper machine set? So there is no difference. A machine set is a machine set in that respect. So day 2, you would be able to go in and configure the autoscaler. You can use it with those machine sets. So you would configure the machine autoscaler and the cluster autoscaler. You can absolutely use those machine sets. It's just one of those, like, it has to have the first set of workers to be able to complete the deployment, because it needs somewhere to deploy the ingress controllers. When you create, say, an infrastructure machine set, it'll have that infrastructure taint, but none of the other services have that config on. So it's slightly, I don't know. I struggle to see the benefit of doing it that way, but it is technically possible. Tolga, is there a way to deny egress traffic from a pod or deployment with specific labels? For sure, with service mesh, there is.
I'm thinking that you could probably use network policies and add your labels in the policy. That was my first. Service mesh is always going to be like because it's very explicit. I actually found this tool online the other day. Hang on, let me see if I can find it really quick. But it's essentially, it allows you to go and like, it's a graphic. It gives you a UI to develop network policies. Let me see if I can dig this thing up really quick. I thought it was really awesome.
Doesn't ACS do that?
It does.
I thought ACS had a visualizer for network policies as well.
Or maybe it will. I'm not sure if it does right now, but maybe I'm not 100%.
So yeah, it's so totally, yes, it's possible. For sure with service mesh, I'm like 99% positive with just regular old network labels or network policies. Yeah, Cilium.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I think you can with network policies, but yeah, I'm just not 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully for anybody, if we didn't answer your question or if we didn't satisfactorily answer your question, just let us know. Tiger, I see your comment that you're in the tower today. We should definitely say hi at some point. So yeah, feel free to ask or clarify or remind us. Anybody else, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in chat. I wanted to, and it's funny because I started thinking about like 2022 has been busy, right? I think we've had 3 releases. So 4, 9, 10, and 11 all happened in 2022. Did 4.9 happen in 2022? I think it did. I think it was right at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I think so.
So for me, it's fun and interesting to look back of like the nature of my role means that I'm almost always looking at either the current or the next release at any point in time. So it's funny to look back and see like how much has changed since 4.9, and especially since like 4.6 finally rolled out of support. I say finally as though it's a bad thing, but it was supported for a long time. So a lot of folks stayed on that release for a long time. Nothing wrong with that, but it's a huge leap in features and capabilities to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And we think about all of these different, what I'll say, I'm trying to think of how to put this in words. What's funny to me, and the way that I'll summarize this or try and put this down, is when we go and we get ready to do a launch, right, a release of OpenShift, so say 4.12 is coming out, like 6 or 8 weeks beforehand, we go and we talk with the product marketing team. It's like, hey, here's all the stuff that's happening in OpenShift 4.12. Every single release I have been involved in since at least 4.4, 4.5, something like that, their response has always been, well, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot going on. It's like, because they look at it as, like, how can I make a, is there something that I can do a press release on? Is there something that's like really big? And there is I guess they're right, and there's not like a big splashy feature or, like there's not a massive generational leap in things in many cases, but rather it's 1,000 things that are small that all come together into a release that make it into a pretty substantial change. You look at, 4.9 was the first time that we had APIs removed. That may not be a huge leap in like capabilities or anything, but it was a big deal, especially for us. We're administrators. Why is my cluster suddenly rejecting this application? Fix it, administrator. We've had improvements in like the compliance stuff, whether it's the compliance operator itself or the file integrity operator. All the stuff that's happened there. ACS has seen a number of improvements. ACM has seen a number of improvements in that respect as well. There's just it's interesting to look back and see with each generational release how it doesn't seem like a lot has happened, and yet going back just 3 releases, it feels like a very different product in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, take a look at like 4.10 to 4.11, right? When you get the dark mode in your console.
Yeah.
Like just from a visual cue. I mean, like it's simple, but it's like, hey, that's kind of a big deal. It's awesome because like I know it's something that I enjoy thoroughly. Like I use it all the time. So. Yeah,
me too. As I sit here and flip through tabs that are not on dark mode, and Yeah, I'm sitting in this room. The lights are off in this room because the camera that I'm using is not the greatest. So I had the lights on and like you couldn't see my face. So I had to turn the lights off, and now like I'm at the mercy of the screen brightness because the screen gets brighter, so do I.
I can't win.
You know, it's 2022. We've all been using webcams for like almost exclusively for 3 years now, and yet they still are quirky, shall we say.
And then with all the like the tooling to help try and make it better and balance it out, it's just you end up fighting against it, you know. So it's just making it worse.
Yeah. So I put in our notes doc here, like, have you seen any trends emerge in 2022? Like, is there, looking back, looking across not just OpenShift or Kubernetes, but kind of across the industry, like, anything that sticks out to you?
The big one right now, and it actually comes to mind today because of like how much popularity it's been on like all of my RSS feeds and Twitter and all that. It's like the AIML, and like the Chat GPT, I think that like that's been especially towards the close of the year, where like data science and stuff like that has kind of like grown in popularity, like especially like mainstream popularity towards like the last 6 months. And I think that going into next year is just going to be, it's just going to go crazy, especially now with the Chat GPT going off and everybody's starting to get involved with that. I think that there's going to be a lot of data science and even like with Red Hat Open Data Science.
Yep.
Yeah. So getting that out there and having like a Jupyter Notebook service available where you can go and put your notebooks out there and do stuff and kind of kick the tires with the data science, services that we have. I see that growing even more and more popular. So that's probably the biggest one that I've seen like coming from 22 that's going to bleed into 23 pretty heavy.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like the AIML thing has certainly started to mature, although I think I have a slightly different perspective on it. Of like, I'm no data scientist by any stretch of the imagination, and like I can spell AIML, and like I don't know a whole lot more about it. So I have no idea how much like you all, like our audience, like, do any of you use AIML? Like, do you have a data science team that is creating models that are getting injected into applications, running in your business? I can only assume folks do. But what I thought was interesting is things like, we've briefly mentioned this. At Ansible Fest, they announced Project Wisdom, right? So it's AI that does plain language processing to create an Ansible playbook. So it's one of those like, I want to create a new Ansible virtual machine, and it goes in and it spits out the Ansible playbook YAML to create a virtual machine. And then you go to the next step and it says, now I want to add a network adapter connected to this network. Like, and this is literally just the name of the task that you're creating. And it spits out the YAML to do that. And I thought it was interesting of like the way I interpret these things, and there's other things going on. I think Chat GPT is an example of when we ask it questions. Somebody internally asked it like, what's a 3-paragraph description of OpenShift? And it spit out a great description. It's not designed to replace us as humans, right? Or as administrators or developers, or like I don't think there will. No, I can't say that because I have no idea. But it's hard to replace a human, right? It's hard to replace a developer, an engineer, an administrator who has not just years of experience, but context and the ability to make those decisions. What was that thing? There was a story they used to tell us in the Navy of like, I think it was in the 80s during the Cold War, where like somebody received the order to like push the button to launch the missiles, and it's like it turned out to be a drill that had gone wrong or an erroneous thing or something like that, and it was a human that made this decision to like, maybe I should double check this and make sure type of thing. So I don't think that the human aspect can ever be replaced, of course, but I'm interested to see how it can make our lives easier. So, for example, like looking at the Ansible playbook example with Project Wisdom, I'm not great at writing Ansible playbooks. I can read them and I can like help troubleshoot and point out where things are wrong, but I do it so infrequently that it takes me a long time to go through and remember all of the syntax and all of the formats and what's the module that I need and all this. But if I could use something like Wisdom to go through and get me even 80% of the way there, so that now instead of taking 30 or 60 minutes to write a playbook, it now takes me 5, that's a huge win.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. There's lots of interesting things there. I'm excited to see how that affects other areas of our industry. Playbooks are pretty straightforward, but there's some other interesting areas. I say that slightly tongue-in-cheek because I have been working with some IBM's research folks, and I'm looking forward to some of the things that are happening in 2023.
Another good example of that too, right? Is it's to your point. It's not to replace; it's to enable, and to enhance. And if you look at, I don't know what it's called, the GitHub thing that they have, Copilot, right? So it's kind of like Copilot, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing, and it goes, and it's like, all right, well, you actually are terrible at writing Go, so here's what you should do, But it's really meant to enable and enhance your skill set and get you down the road and get your product out and stuff like that, and not to replace Andrew and Jonny or whatever, So it's to make things better. The other one, because we were talking about Edge. Well, you mentioned Edge, right? It is like Microshift. Microshift, in the way that Microshift is able to consume some of the AIML things, and some of the projects that I'm associated with right now, they're working on like video detection and object detection, but using Microshift on top of like a device. So think of like a drone or some like quadcopter thing, and it's got like a little Microshift mini device kind of hanging off of it and processing. I think it's
we've got customers
awesome.
who are doing that. They're doing it with not with Microshift or Red Hat Device Edge, but who was it?
Sorry.
Lockheed Martin. Yeah, I'm in a meeting with a bunch of marketing folks. I keep getting corrected on product names versus project names.
I'm the worst, man.
But I think it was like 2 years ago, Lockheed Martin did a summit session on exactly that. Like they were building a machine learning model and then injecting it into like drones or something like that in order to do aerial mapping and stuff like that. So it's super interesting to see those things come to fruition. Tolga, when you need a node or nodes with a specific IP, is it better to add them manually without a machine set, or create a new machine set for them and change IPs afterwards? So anytime you use a machine set to provision nodes, it requires DHCP. I say that, I don't know if that's necessarily true for bare metal API, but it's definitely true for anything else. Jonny, maybe you've done a lot more bare metal than me.
I think you're right.
So after the machines are stood up, you could go in and use something like the enum state operator to configure a static IP on that node. That being said, I would not recommend doing that. Right, you're effectively creating a snowflake. Right, you're creating something where one definition says it looks like this, and then another definition says it looks like this. And so, how do you, if somebody new comes on the team or something like that, how do they rectify which one is the correct one? So I would suggest, and I think this is something that always surprises me that more folks don't know, is you can, if you deploy an IPI cluster, you can add nodes to the cluster just like you do with UPI. Right? You get the ignition config, right? The worker ignition config. You boot up the nodes. Say you provision a VMware virtual machine. Using the OVA. You point it to its, or I guess you attach now. As a VM option, you attach that ignition file and boot it up, and it joins the cluster just like if it were an IPI cluster. And with that, you can fully customize all those network things, right? So you can boot it using the OVA, you can boot it and use kernel parameters if you really want to try and catch the thing, or you just use the VM option, what's it called? The network args. I'll have to look it up follow the IPI documentation. It tells you exactly how to set the IPs. Or you can boot to the live ISO and do it that way. Although I don't know if that would work with a UPI environment. Because I think if you boot to the live ISO, it doesn't install VMware Tools. And I'm pretty sure VMware Tools is required for the VMware cloud provider, which means that it wouldn't be able to join the cluster. So we did show that, Tolga. It has been a long time.
I pasted the link to the item state to that stream.
Yeah, did we show during the worker node bonanza? Did we show how to add a? I don't remember if we showed how to do that. I think I showed it like one of the first live streams that we ever did back in 2020. I think Christian and I, or maybe Reese and I, showed how to do that. But it's pretty outdated now. That would be like 4.4 time frame, 4.3, 4.4 time frame. So I'm almost positive we've shown it. I would say check the worker node bonanza episode. Let's see if I can find the link to that one real quick. That's episode 83. So I will paste this link in the chat here. So it might be in that stream. If not, and we can double check. We should definitely add that as a topic for the New Year, John.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
I think we were trying to do it with. I think I was trying to do it with AWS, and I was having issues with it. So, if anything, I could probably just go through and create like another, just like a side video, like a clip or whatever, and just kind of go through the process. Because I think you did UPI and an IPI. I think that's how you did it, or maybe something like that. It was in the worker bonanza. You're right.
Yeah. It's been a little bit, and we've been busy in between them, so I don't remember the precise details. I'll have to go back and watch our own stream. That also reminds me, so 2023, the first part of 2023 is going to be busy, right? So January 11th which is a Wednesday, if I remember correctly, is the What's New in OpenShift 4.12 live stream. And I think that backs up against our live stream that day. So we may or may not have a stream that day, depending on how long the What's New runs. So the first week of January, which is the third or fourth, we won't be streaming. The week after that is the What's New. We'll probably be streaming, but we're not sure. The week after that, which is the 18th or 19th, we will be streaming. The week after that, I don't think we'll be streaming. Is that the week? Because I think that's the week that both you and I are going to be at Tech Exchange.
Yeah.
So I'll be in Dublin, you'll be in Dallas. So we won't be the last week of January, we won't be streaming.
Yeah.
And then I think I'm traveling again the week after that, so you'll be on your own. So yeah, it's the first 6 weeks of 2023 are already pretty busy.
Yeah, but it indeed they're going to be crazy. The cool thing though is that because we've been reaching out and begging everybody to come onto the show and harassing people, we've got some really good topics coming up. I think that OpenShift logging is going to be an awesome one because we've had a lot of requests over the low key and vector stuff, and we've got the right contacts now, I think, and so getting them on, they were really interested in doing the demo of low key and vector, and I can't remember the other thing. There was something else that they were really kind of hip about, but and then there's some other stuff with Service Mesh, like some changes with Service Mesh 2.3, and I'm sure there'll probably be another release or Y version or whatever by the time we get there, where we'll have Ortwin back on and have him talk some more about his stuff, because that was a pretty popular episode, and there's a lot of interest around Service Mesh and SEO, and especially as zero trust and security kind of becomes like a blanket conversation, it'll be good to have those people on.
Yeah, we had somebody reach out and ask us about dev spaces as well.
Yep.
Taylor, question about the move to ODF. Can you clarify the relationship between the ODF and OCS operators? Docs weren't clear on whether ODF manages the OCS operator or if they work together. So OCS is the old name for ODF. So OpenShift 3 days, it was OpenShift container storage, it was cluster based. And then OpenShift 4 until, was it 4.8, Johnny?
Yeah.
It was
4.8.
fairly late. Yeah, it was fairly late. It was like I want to say 4.7 or 4.8, but I want to say 4.8. It was OCS, but it was, or OpenShift container storage, but it was Ceph based. And then basically they rebranded over to OpenShift Data Foundation, ODF. So in the OpenShift 4 line, it's two names, but they're the exact same thing. So I would expect that you would want to deploy ODF if that is what you have today, and it'll manage. I think if you have OCS installed, it basically takes over those CRDs.
Yeah, if you're using 4.10 or newer, then ODF operator is the operator that you want to use. I think if you're in like that, if you're like 4.8, 4.9, 4.10, then you can still use the OCS operator as your subscription. But I think 4.10 is where that's where they actually start deploying part of the storage system and stuff like that out of the box with the deployment.
Yeah. Let's see. Coming 2023, start training or contact per week, 3 days online sessions. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, not really sure. But
I know.
Back. Oh, sorry.
No, so there's been some just bigger picture. I guess there's now 2 streams that also go to, and I think that that person NBTD is on the Red Hat YouTube channel. So there's only 2 of the OpenShift streams that are on the Red Hat YouTube channel now, I think. All of the others are on the OpenShift YouTube channel. So there has been some changes there, and we're one of the 2 that's on the Red Hat channel. If we contact or work with a training session, we've talked about that before. Actually, that's something that might be interesting to bring up with y'all, with the audience, which is so for Red Hat folks, you're probably familiar with our HPDS, the Red Hat Product Demo System. So I had a conversation with the team that runs that, and one of the things that we talked about was effectively doing a lab as a stream. So is that something that would be interesting to anybody who is watching the stream, right? Of, hey, let's all join a stream. Let's all go to our HPDS, right? We can access, and that includes not just Red Hat folks, but anybody who's watching us live, and pull in an OpenShift environment, and we can walk through and look at different aspects kind of together, almost like a training environment or a class. So I thought that was something that could be interesting. Logistically, it might be a little bit challenging, but we can figure that out as we go, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see, Dijar, apologies for butchering anybody's name. Today, we connect only a single Ceph cluster into an OpenShift cluster via ODF. Will there be an option in the future to connect multiple Ceph clusters in the same OpenShift cluster? With ODF, I don't think so. I don't know whether or not you would be able to use like Ceph in external mode and connect more than one that way. But I admit I am not a Ceph or ODF expert.
Yeah, I was thinking kind of the same way you are. Like you have 2 clusters and 1 external Ceph, then yes, that should be fine. But multiple ODFs and multiple, or in a single ODF. I mean, maybe possibly as like, they'd have to both be external and then they'd have to be their own storage class, possibly, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think.
That's a good question.
I know who we can ask about that. And also, where is the streaming calendar? I think that they still have, the ODF folks still have a stream that happens every once in a while. I just don't know when it happens.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think I know which one you're talking about. That's like the data services one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it monthly? I think it might be monthly.
So yeah, they're so if you look for the data services live stream, that is the Ceph or the ODF team doing that. So they would definitely, they'll know the answer to that off the top of their head. Can we monitor multiple applications on Prometheus and Grafana using the operator? Yes, absolutely. So if we look at, where's my other window over here? I guess I should share my window, huh?
I mean, we'll figure it out. We'll just walk through it.
Yeah. Paint a image with words, right?
That's right.
So if we look in the docs for monitoring, oops, not logging, but monitoring, and we look for user workload monitoring or enable monitoring for defined projects. So basically you turn on this, it deploys a second Grafana instance, it plugs everything in through Thanos, and then effectively what it should do down here is, where is it? Managing metrics. I thought it was in this page, but it's CRDs. Basically you define a CRD in the namespace that says, this is the endpoint and these are the metrics to monitor, and it will scrape those and bring them into the user monitoring Prometheus.
And we did a stream on it, and I'm trying to find the link to it right now. At least I think we did. Maybe I made it up.
Yeah, no. This is what happens when I don't look at the documentation enough and it changes.
Oh, found it.
Ah, here we go. Yeah, so this kind of describes what you want to do, you know, all the stuff that you want to create there. There's also here's the service monitor definition. So the documentation has how to do it, and effectively you're just creating CRDs in each namespace that tell it where to go and look. We should probably explicitly, I think there's a blog post on how to do that as well, so we can dig that up.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it really quick.
Yep. Yeah, so, and thank you for linking the custom Grafana stream. So that is one thing to point out, of whether it's user workload monitoring or even other metrics that are scraped by default from OpenShift and all the different components in OpenShift, you cannot modify, or as of 4.11, I think, Jonny, we have fully removed the Grafana instance. It was always supposed to be read-only. I know a lot of folks did go in and modify it, but it was always supposed to be read-only. So the custom Grafana stream was where we went in and showed how to use the Grafana operator to deploy an instance and then point that to the internal or the OpenShift managed Prometheus and Thanos instances. So that way you can create your own custom dashboards for all that other stuff. Explain configuration, high level of 2 different vendor applications can have single monitoring, how we will manage. So it depends on what they're using in order to do that, I'll say, metrics collection. So I was talking with a partner that does monitoring the other day, and they were asking, how do we collect metrics? Like, are there ways that we can hook in with Kubelet in order to get that out? And do we need to deploy a daemon set in order to have our stuff available on each pod? And one of the folks, basically suggested off the top of, you can just use Prometheus, right? There's already Prometheus exporters on every node. You can use node export and get all that data out. So that is one way to do it, right? Anything can go and look at and pull metrics from a Prometheus endpoint. So if you deploy, you want to do user application monitoring, you deploy the user app, we were just looking at user workload monitoring with OpenShift, and set up the Prometheus endpoint there. A third party could then just look at that same endpoint and scrape the metrics. They could also look directly at Prometheus and just query that data out of Prometheus and or configure a forwarder. Alternatively, it can just collect that information itself. And I think that's what most of the third-party vendors do, is effectively they have their own collectors that get that data. And whether that's coming from a Prometheus exporter that the application has, they scrape it directly, as opposed to querying Prometheus to get the data, or whether it's like a custom add-on or something like that that they add to the application. Kind of all of those work. What's the thing about like monitoring affects what you're monitoring? So I'm trying to remember, there's some pithy phrase about it. But it's like, if you have an application, say it's something simple like an Apache web server, and it has its metrics endpoint, and that metrics endpoint starts getting, tagged more and more and more often as additional collectors are getting information at more and more, frequent intervals. That can have, that can start to consume meaningful resources for the application, for the pod. So you just sometimes have to take that into account. I have seen that before, John, when I was a system administrator, a VMware administrator, right? Of we're going to monitor this thing to death. Like quite literally, that was what was happening. It was being monitored to death. It was spending more time responding to, and this was a storage system. It was spending more time responding to queries for things like storage latency and disk latency and disk, like the storage team, they were troubleshooting a problem. And so they pointed their data collection script at the storage array to get like very granular, very frequent collection metrics on a per disk basis across hundreds of disks. So it's like the CPU of the storage system was spending all of this time serving metrics instead of serving data. It's like, so that was a fun one.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it is possible. Configuration wise, I don't think there's nothing special you would need to do with OpenShift. Either turn on or not the user workload monitoring. Your application would need to export those metrics. If you're using OpenShift user workload monitoring, it's Prometheus, so it would need to be in the exporter format.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, whatever your third-party monitoring would be. What are recommendation for like metrics or for monitoring? My approach has always been whatever meets your needs. Some folks, they are happy with and they only need what's done and what's available through Prometheus and the OpenShift tools. I would say that anecdotally, a lot of organizations have some third-party vendor, somebody that they use that is more broad than just OpenShift. Right? So they've got a tool that's monitoring their VMware stuff and their KVM stuff and their bare metal, RHEL stuff. Like it's one tool suite of things across all of these different aspects, all these different things that are going on, and they want to integrate that naturally. What was the one that HP used to make? HP.
No, SM9.
Tivoli. So, what was Tivoli? Not Tivoli.
Tivoli was IBM, right? That was the IBM thing. That was like their
maybe.
Is that like their satellite?
Or is that yeah, something like that. Yeah, there's one. HP had one that I remember using years ago. That was, it was this massive thing. I think the deployment we had was like 40 servers just for doing, just 40 virtual machines just to like collect and aggregate and deconflict and summarize and all that.
Yeah, I thought it was like SM9. I think maybe that was just our name for it. I don't remember, but like, yeah. Like,
for monitoring each cluster we install, configure separate Prometheus. So for that, so sorry, I misunderstood. So you've got multiple OpenShift clusters, and you want to aggregate those resources. OpenView, yes, thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
I would suggest ACM. So ACM out of the box, it'll take those metrics and it'll aggregate them up. It also gives you different visibility into the things that are happening in the cluster. Now, I wish I had ACM available. So ACM will give you like more application-centric as well as more, for lack of a better term, node-centric utilization resources. So I find ACM's monitoring capabilities to be useful, in particular when you're aggregating.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, and all that's done through Thanos, I think.
And one thing to kind of key in with all your monitoring and stuff like that too is like if we had Hillary on a bunch of episodes ago, and she's an SRE here at Red Hat, and like some of the things that we were talking about with monitoring and dashboards and stuff like that is it needs to pass like that 3 a.m. sniff test. Like if you're coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning to respond to an event, make sure like when you hit that dashboard, it tells you exactly what you need to know, when you need to know it, instead of you having to like click around and dig through things because, you don't want any of your tier 1 or tier 2 admins coming in and having to like dig through layers and layers and layers of context to try and sniff out the answer. So just make sure that you've got a nice succinct dashboard with the appropriate metrics for your clusters or for your applications.
Yeah, these are great questions. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
So Jonny, any predictions for 2023? Any thoughts?
We talked about the AI ML stuff a little bit. I definitely think that security and just when I say security, I mean like the big oxygen bubble around everything security, like application development security, processes, stuff like that. I feel like that supply chain is like, that was just the start, right? So supply chain security, but like DevSecOps, that's going to be the theme, I think, for 23, right? It's going to be locking down our infrastructure all the way from the developer workstation or workspace all the way to the application. So I see that getting heavier and heavier, and the more tools like with Cosign and the Sigstore project in general, I just feel like there's going to be so much emphasis around that's going to be the major theme of 23.
Yeah, I can already give you a hint for anyone who's listening that you're going to hear a lot from Red Hat, and a lot of the emails you'll be getting from like our marketing folks will be around like adopting and using ACM and ACS in order to help with that process and stuff like that. It's something that we see a lot of folks being interested in, and I know like my team, the folks on my peers and their teams, like there's a lot of work happening around like how do we make that easy. That was going to be kind of one of my thoughts is I feel old when I say this, right? I've been in this industry for like 20 plus years now, right?
Oh yeah.
So I started virtualization in 2007. And for the first like 3-4 years, it was like a bunch of nerds, right? We were all super technical. Everybody was, this deep in all of the technical aspects and digging in and figuring out what was going on with, ESX at the time, not even ESXi, and how it works, and all of these different ways to tune and tweak and adjust and maximize all of that investment. And at some point, for lack of a better term, it jumped the proverbial shark, right? And it just got too complex.
Mm-hmm.
And like for me, in my mind, I remember going to VMworld in like 2011, and I realized that there was this huge number of MSPs that were, on the expo floor. I was walking around and I was talking with different companies, and of course the traditional vendors were there. The EMCs and NetApps and IBMs and Lenovo's and Dell and HP and all that. But like all of the mid-tier sponsors were all like companies that help you run your virtualization empire. And it was one of those like, it's gotten so complex and so massive that people want help. Like suddenly we see this influx. And then as the years went by, I think it started to simplify. To pick on the VMware ecosystem again, right? We saw the VxRail stuff come out, right? Of, here's this, now one solution that goes in and it architects and manages all of the other components for you and makes it easier. I feel like we're somewhere in the middle section there with Kubernetes right now, right? The security thing I think is a good example. Like security it's a whole nother layer that gets put on top of everything. And we all have to think about it, and we all have to be cognizant of it and respectful of it all of the time. And the whole weakest link in the chain, like if we're not, then there's certainly ramifications. So my suspicion is we're going to start seeing more things to make it simple and achievable and reliable across the board in those respects. Because right now I couldn't do it. I mean, Jonny, you and I live this stuff every day. I couldn't, I'm familiar with the software supply chain architecture, and there are so many different pieces that I don't know as a single person if I would be capable of effectively implementing that.
Yeah.
It's, there's at least 2 distinct, if not 3 distinct skill sets there, or enough for three different people to encompass.
Yeah. And the other part of that, that you're talking about, it needs to be consumable, right? So we need to be able to share this information with people that aren't extremely technical, so that way they can make. I'm kind of picking on security professionals, like especially within in the government, right, where they don't necessarily keep up with the technology, or the technology is going to move beyond their skill set. So we need to make it consumable for people that don't necessarily have that deep technical knowledge, and so that way you don't spend so much time like circling the wagon over the same kind of like deeper concepts about containerization or Kubernetes orchestration. Kind of like you know how that transition when we went from physical to virtual. We finally got caught up on virtual machine infrastructure and how that works, and got people comfortable with that. And now we've gone to Kubernetes, and it's kind of like we've almost reset the switch on a lot of people, So I think making it to where it's palpable for the non-technical professionals.
Now you're bringing up bad memories, John. I just had now I'm remembering meetings with like the CMDB team of like, well, we need to know every time a virtual machine migrates to a new node, we need to be able to determine like if this host fails, precisely which VMs run. I swear to you, maybe 2 months ago, I saw an email that was basically asking the same thing of like, hey, the customer wants to be able to update their CMDB every time a pod gets scheduled. And I can't fathom what you would do with that data and why. Anyways.
Yeah. I could drop names. I'm not going to. I'm still angry at some people. Like I'm still I'm still mad at people, so I won't drop any names. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, you know how we solved the live migration problem, right? With CMDB, we gave them what they wanted, and then we started doing updates.
Oh yeah.
and hey, here's 10,000 VMs worth of nodes going into maintenance mode and VMs migrating around, and oh yeah, we need to do this again next week and the week after and the week after.
That's right.
They very quickly realized that it was not reasonable.
That's like that subreddit. It's like malicious compliance. Like, okay, you want that? You got it. 100%. I'm on it.
Let's see, Tolga, any use cases where it is better to use ACM or OpenShift GitOps? I would say, so how do I phrase this? It feels to me, and Andrew has no inside knowledge here, Jonny's probably the better expert here, but it feels like GitOps is winning. And I say that because ACM is now expanding, and they have for several releases now, to include like application sets and the GitOps definitions. So if you learn the GitOps methodology, I guess, of defining an application, you can now use it with both. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at multi-cluster deployment, or multiple cluster deployment, ACM is obviously the tool for that, right? Like you want to use ACM to deploy, monitor, and track your clusters. And then ACM is also, it's always had a GitOps component to it, but it's like, to Andrew's point, it's taking in some of the stuff from OpenShift GitOps. So it's going to be a complementary service to OpenShift GitOps. And I think what you'll see in the future is that like as OpenShift GitOps capabilities grow and increase, well, as they increase and get and mature, that ACM will also pick up on some of those things, and like there will be just that nice complementary Red Hat fist bump in between where they just work really nice together. But on a black and white, ones and zeros, if you're looking for cluster deployment, then ACM is your tool. If you're looking for application deployment, whether it's single cluster or even multi-cluster, then OpenShift GitOps is a strong tool as well. But ACM can do it, but I think that OpenShift GitOps is probably the better for the application side.
Yeah, I was just thinking that as well. I think it gives you, so let's think this out, right? So let's say I use ACM as my application deployment tool. So I now have a single ACM cluster that might be deploying and managing applications across dozens or hundreds of OpenShift clusters. And as we look at Red Hat Device Edge, single node OpenShift, I think they've increased their scalability up to like 2,000 clusters or something like that. So I can have one ACM that is managing all of those, which I think would get pretty complicated pretty quickly. Or, in my opinion, particularly at scale, the sort of meta aspect comes into, gosh, excuse me, I got the hiccups all of a sudden. It comes into play of use ACM to deploy GitOps and assign the applications to GitOps in each one of the clusters, and then let the cluster self-manage.
Yeah, and the good part about ACM is you get all the observability. So here's the other part about ACM and OpenShift GitOps, right? Like ACM has all the policies. So then you can, if you have multiple clusters, you can use OpenShift GitOps to maybe create a secret using like external secrets operator or HashiCorp Vault, and then you can distribute that secret using a policy. So now you're really using both of these products in tandem to essentially do what you'd have to go and create it on each individual cluster that you wanted that secret deployed to, if you were only using one or the other, So it's the observability of ACM and the governance that you get out of ACM is just a complementary service to OpenShift GitOps, and the OpenShift GitOps application management is a complementary service to ACM. Like they are two awesome products, and they're really awesome together.
Yeah. Let's see, facing an error while configuring, unable to attach or mount volume, and it seems the secret key is missing. So are you trying to mount a secret as a volume? Let me rephrase that. Anytime you attach a secret to a pod, it's more or less mounted like a volume. So I don't know if maybe it's an empty secret that it's throwing an error on. Alternatively, if it's, depending on where the volume is coming from, I can envision, I don't know, like an encrypted volume or thinking iSCSI chap or something like that, where it needs a password or something to unlock the volume that it's not getting access to that. Yeah, secret is not created.
Yeah. Sorry, you're spot on, Andrew. That's what I was going to say. My bad.
No, I was only going to say that would be my guess, without additional information.
Yeah, the only other way would be as an environment variable, but in this case, it looks like you're trying to mount it as a volume, and it doesn't exist. But check your config too, because you might have the key in there wrong. So if it's looking for a specific key within the secret, make sure that you've defined that.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Might have a typo in the name or something.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I've ever done that.
Have you seen my demos?
Tell you, that's what I need. I need something, an AI that can tell me when I make dumb mistakes in YAML. And I don't mean like a YAML linter. I mean like oh, this is invalid YAML. There's an error here. Like, great, there's a colon. Like, now I have to spend the next 5 minutes remembering YAML syntax and figuring out indentation is affected and like all this other stuff. Or just tell me that, oh no, this indentation is off. Like, come on, machine learning. Come on, artificial intelligence.
Dude, when you go back and forth, like, so in Makefiles, you have to use a tab to go to the next whatever, to the parameter. But everything else is, you can use spaces with everything else, and it's fine. I was getting killed by this Makefile. I'm like, I don't understand what's happening right now, and it's because it wants you to use a tab, not spaces. I'm like, I don't get it.
Yep.
Murder.
Yeah. Or Python, and it's white space is important.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Anyways, so we're at a quarter after the hour, so. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to ask them, send them in via chat now. We'll do our best to address those here before we end the stream. Other than that, if you're not watching us live, if you're watching a recording or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us, or anybody if you would like. You can reach out to us anytime. So you can reach me very easily at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. Just first name last name for me, which is not true of everyone I discovered. I don't know if I got assigned that email address or it was one of the aliases I requested, but not everyone uses first name last name. So you can always reach out to me via email. You can also reach out to me via the various social media platforms. I'm at Practical Andrew across all of them. I will admit I have not really been on Twitter lately. But you can still send me a message there. It'll just take me a while to probably see it. Or if you want to reach out to Jonny, Jonny is very simply Jonny, Jonny, at redhat.com. And if you can't remember both of us or both of our addresses, that's fine. We always tag each other in responses and stuff like that. So whichever one of us you do remember, just send us an email. We're happy to respond. And we have been getting a number of those lately. Lots of folks have been reaching out. We do appreciate it. We try our best to help everyone. And if we don't know, which happens a lot, find the right resources inside of Red Hat to get those answers for you. Again, so this is our last stream for the year. So next week I will be at home? I don't even know where I'll be next week. Hopefully playing video games and relaxing with my kids. So I hope everyone has a great set of holidays. My sincere apologies and heartfelt condolences to folks who have to work over the holidays. But as administrators, I think that's just part of the deal that we are charged with, if you will. So I hope everything goes well. I hope it's smooth sailing. I hope that you don't get any late night calls or anything like that. I hope I'm not jinxing anyone. Here, let me knock on wood by saying that. But I hope it's a peaceful and quiet holiday season for everyone. And then my last thought here is just to tell you, thank you, Jonny. I appreciate all your help throughout the year.
I love it.
Wait, I'm trying to remember. It's been over a year now since you became co-host, right?
Yep, just over a year.
It's been So it's been a blast, and it's been fun. Every time we do one of these, I learn something.
I totally agree. I love it. Like it doesn't feel like work. Like I tell you all the time, man. Like I just appreciate the opportunity. And I try and take advantage of it. It's something this is probably my favorite part of the week for sure. Especially like when, we're talking about something like brand new, like the hyperscaler or the oh man, what's it called? That
HyperShift.
HyperShift. Thank you. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But talking about stuff like that, just all the super nerd stuff, I love it. And so yeah, I'm really thankful to be here. I'm glad I'm here, and hopefully we get to keep this going through 23 and 24 and forever.
Yeah. Well, here I'll put my contact information. Right? You notice that my title is now manager, right? Like this is my excuse to stay technical. Like, this is how I stay in touch with what's going on instead of getting lost in meetings and
that's right
and phone calls. So yeah, I'm holding on for dear life, right?
Don't let go, Andrew. Don't let go.
But yeah, it's been a blast. I'm looking forward to next year. I'm looking forward to all the topics that we got going on. You and I both, because we're participating in Tech Exchange, that means that we're like creating content that we're going to get to use in the streams and stuff like that, reuse in the streams, which I'm excited about as well.
Me too.
There's some really cool open hybrid cloud stuff that we're going to be presenting on there and showcasing that I'm looking forward to turning that into a topic that we can talk about here on the stream. Among many other things.
I was looking at some of the topics yesterday. There's a lot of good stuff out there, so I'm really looking forward. There's a lot. Oh man, it's going to be exciting. I'm really excited for next year and just everything.
I guess I should point out Tech Exchange. So for anybody who Red Hat folks, it's an internal, not a conference. It's a training. It is an internal training for Red Hat folks, and we call it Tech Exchange because it's focused on basically our technical people, right? And it's technical folks from the business unit like me or engineering like Jonny who go out and just the folks in our field, so the SAs and stuff that our customers interact with. It's like, tell me about this. I want to learn more about this. And we go out and give sessions on it. And it's a great, I hate to call it a forcing function, but it's a great forcing function for updating a lot of things and creating a lot of new stuff that we happily get to reuse here. So I'll also point out that we'll probably be reusing some of that during Summit as well. Speaking of which, Summit call for papers is open right now. It's open until January 11th. So if anybody whether you're a Red Hat employee, a customer, or just somebody walking past us on the street and happen to look in the window, if you have any topics that you're interested in, submit them to the call for papers. There has, how should I say this? There has been a lot of vocal feedback to the Summit team over the last several years about the lack of technical content. So I think they're really making an effort to include some great technical content this year. And they're already coordinating with us on what they want to include and the topics that we should cover. So yeah, tech exchanges for Red Hatters. It used to be for partners, but I don't think partners are coming this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's like a combination tech exchange and sales
Partner
kickoff.
exchange.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there used to be Partner Exchange. I used to go to Partner Exchange as a partner, which was a fun one. But yeah, so yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Tech Exchange is for Red Hatters. Summit is for everyone. All right. I had nothing else, Johnny. That's all I had. I'm done for 2022.
It's a wrap. It's a wrap.
Yeah.
No, hey, thank you again, Andrew. I really do mean it. Like, I love this opportunity, and I'm glad that I get to be here, and it's a great part of the week for me every week. So like, just thank you, and it's been an awesome year.
Likewise. All right, everyone. Don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to chat, to answer questions. Keep up with everyone over the next couple of weeks, and we will see you on January 11th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Have a great set of holidays. Bye now.